Let's go to Texas. We've got Corey. He, him is an atheist, and it sounds like you've got a question about evolution. Hey, Corey, you're chatting with Secular Rarity and Jim Barrows. What you got for us?
Hey guys, how y'all doing?
Doing good
Pretty
for
good.
Sunday.
So, my question is take a tiny bit of explaining. Obviously, we know how evolution works. You know, a random example: the camels that evolved over millions of years, along with the desert evolving as we know it today, so they could adapt to it and live through it.
Mhm.
My question on is mostly for mankind and humanity is, when you go back to the Australopithecus species, when you have the Homo erectus, it seems like their environments to evolve into what we are known as today seemed fairly stable as far as other than, heat and cold and wet and dry and stuff like that. But today we have such advances in technology and science and medical. And I feel today we're constantly changing our environment on a frequent basis, whether it be digging, whether it be building, whether it be, smog. I feel like it's constantly changing. So the two questions I have in regards to that, which are kind of blending together, is one, how does that affect our evolution, and how would that affect the evolution cycle if we as a human species have never really encountered such a constantly changing environment? As well as, is it possible that we could actually fast forward evolution, being instead of waiting millions of years to become immune to coronavirus or the flu, for example, we have vaccines now.
Yeah,
Is it
very
possible
interesting.
that we can fast forward evolution, and how does our constant changing environment, like animals, for instance, all they got to do is evolve, and to our
But we are
environment
animals.
changes, like when we cut down forests and stuff. How
So,
does this affect our evolution?
Yeah,
well,
so
that's a
yeah, go
good
ahead.
question.
Please,
I,
Jim.
I don't know that there's a good answer to that question.
Yeah.
I think a couple of things to
That's
kind of
why I'm
adjust your
calling you
thinking.
guys. Sorry, that's why I'm calling
Yeah,
you guys, because it's
We'll
not an
do our
internet
best.
question. It's
yeah,
not
we're
something I
doing
can
it.
look up.
We'll do our best. There is no such thing really as speed of evolution. I mean, evolution happens, and sometimes it happens quickly, sometimes it doesn't. As we evolve against diseases, those people who had COVID and survived it, at least the earlier versions of it, are all immune to it, and so that's changed. Whether or not they pass that down, I think, is still to be seen. Um, but we've only been around for 100,000 years, and to call the climate stable for 100,000 years, yeah, I mean, I think you pick any 100,000 years, and go, yeah, that's stable. Um, because we're not talking on the timescales that it still happens. We're not fully evolved. There's no such thing as fully evolved. Um, will we evolve to handle higher levels of pollution? Probably, because those who can't handle it will die out. If they die out before they reproduce, the only folks you got to have surviving are the ones who can handle higher levels of pollution. But then the question becomes, how rapidly does the pollution level change? It can change so rapidly that we don't have any chance to for that type of evolution to happen, right? To have those who can't handle it die off and those who can reproduce. That takes 25 years for in a generation for humans, roughly. Um, so we don't evolve all that fast. And that's despite the fact that we've got something like 40 mutations each, something like that. Maybe it's higher. I'm sure somebody in chat will check that for me. But I mean, it's hard to say because a lot depends on what the climate does. The climate's changing very, very rapidly. Like when I was growing up as a kid, 40 years ago, Category 5 hurricanes were unheard of. We have one every year now for the last 5-10 years. So, we're heating up. And we've got that massive storm coming in, which is supposed to be a Category 5 plus. We don't have anything that goes higher than Category 5. So, that looks like it might hit the East Coast. Are we going to be able to evolve or technologize? or develops technology to survive what's coming? That's a really good question. And those are things we got to answer. Because it's happening faster than maybe we can adjust. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting question, I think, Corey. And Jim and I are just kind of speculating, and like throwing a bunch of wet spaghetti at the wall and, kind of seeing what the evidence, shows out to be the case. So the first thing I want to say is just that, like, all living organisms, right? Like, as long as the species is still going, man, it seems to be like there's these little changes that keep happening, and it just eventually, once we have enough time to separate these changes and they've become fixed in the population and so forth, then it's like, oh my gosh, this is something totally different. Like, it used to be this lizardy looking thing, now it's this more bird-like thing. Like, awesome. But yeah, that's still happening for us as people, and 100,000 years from now, humans could have evolved into a completely different species. It could be the case that Homo sapiens completely die out and this new species just takes over the world. It could be the case that this new species that evolves from Homo sapiens lives at the same time and alongside Homo sapiens. This has happened for a bunch of hominids, and there's really, really great places, by the way, that you can, I'm sure you probably know one of the hosts here, Forrest Valkai. Guy has a lot of freaking great stuff on this. Erica Gutsick Gibbon does as well too. And Creation Myths Dan. Like, all three of those people have a lot of super knowledge on this. I'm going to tell you now what is my little SR hypothesis-y thingy. Okay. So this is in no way, shape, or form something that you should just be like, yeah, that's what scientists think. But I do think there's some good backing to this from a lot of the stuff that I've heard out there. So there's two different types. There's two different types of cells in the body, right? So you've got the ones that pass on to the next generation, which are like germline cells. And then you've got the ones that are just like all going to die off whenever that specific individual dies. And those are the somatic cells. So there was a long time where people were like, hey, if I get really big muscles when I'm alive, my kid will also have big muscles because that's how it works. It doesn't, because those big muscles aren't related to the cells that pass to the offspring, right? But if we start to create a culture amongst a social species that actively looks for individuals with large muscles to reproduce with, I think it's pretty easy to see how over a very long time period, it's possible that somehow kind of plays with the germ cells, right? In just the sense of like, now the individuals that are reproducing more often are ones that may just have this genetic mutation where they can just, their body is more programmed to like get those muscles easier. And I'm just using the word program there just for simplicity's sake, but like, there are certain aspects about our genes that say like, you're more likely to do this or not do this. And so if we just start seeing a bunch of people with really large muscles just banging all the time and making a bunch of kids, those traits could ultimately be selected for, right? So there's a little bit of play on both sides of those types of cells. But again, this is just total Elliot, just spitting my little hypothesis at you. I think where we're seeing the largest evolution amongst the human species is in the brain. I think the wiring of our brain is what's going to be the thing that really radically changes over the next 50,000 to 100,000 years, as opposed to like the outward physical appearance, right? But I don't know. Yeah. Forrest definitely is a super great, super great person to touch base with. Again, those other wonderful people, Erica Gutsick Gibbon, Creation Myths Dan. I know Jim spouted a bunch. I spouted a bunch at you, Corey. And we do have some other great calls, and we're getting close to the end. So just give us your quick little thoughts on this, and maybe call us back in the future. Okay. What do you think about what we said?
I definitely, respect y'all's viewpoints. And that's why I called initially, was because I wanted to get an opinion from, people who knew what they were talking about. I sparked the idea of the question. I watched the Ken Ham and Bill Nye Creationist Museum tour today, And
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I felt like I lost brain cells, and it just kind of sparked that idea. And I saw that y'all were live today, so I
Yeah.
figured I would call in and ask that question because I thought it was very important, and I thought it was very interesting. So, but that's all I got for you guys.
Well, we're super glad you called, Corey.
Yeah.
And yeah, give us a call back if you get a question, something similar in the future where it just kind of sticks in your brain and you're not really sure. And do like definitely just keep watching the channel because Forrest is gonna be back, and there will be Dr. Ben will be back on the ACA stuff too in the future. There's all kinds of freaking people that we've got here who have even more knowledge and can point you to some great studies. So call us back in the future.